All right, welcome to the How to Create Successful and Profitable Retreats Masterclass. I am Sarah Martinez, and I am a retreat specialist and planner. And to introduce myself for those of you that don't know me, I started in the corporate meeting world when I was 17 years old, and I worked in that actually up till last year. I had been working remotely for the company that I originally started working with when I was 17. But back in 2017, I got introduced to retreats, and I decided that I wanted to work in the event space from more of an impact space versus corporate. So I continued doing the corporate because I was really good at it and I loved it. And it was kind of one of those things that I could do in my sleep. But I really started to look at impact and transformational events, and specifically retreats. Because for me, the very first retreat that I went on, it changed my life forever. And I have never been the same since. And I'm extremely grateful for it. And at that time, even though retreats have been around for decades, they haven't been a prominent thing until about the last few years. And now it has turned into, it is an over $900 billion industry, wellness travel. So huge industry, enough for everyone on here to impact in the way that they desire. Because the thing that I love about retreats, when you get into corporate travel, of course, every corporation has its own mission and its own ethics. But when you get into retreats and transformational travel, it gets even deeper because it's the person that's facilitating. It is their unique purpose here on this planet that gets to come to light when they host and facilitate that retreat. And that is what is so remarkable. And that is what I love about this space. So that is a little bit about me. And we are going to dive into some of the foundational pieces of creating successful and profitable retreats. So when I got into retreats, what I noticed was there was a lot of people doing them that were kind of just winging it. And some of you might have done that. Maybe you feel like you are currently doing it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But just like any business, when we can build it on a really strong foundation, we get to continue to reap the rewards for years to come. And that is my goal when I work with people on their retreats, especially when they want to have it be a part of their business model, is how can we create a really good foundation so that it just flows and you become a facilitator that can continue to do it for years to come, and it comes with ease. Not just the facilitation part, because a lot of times when we're teaching what we love, that comes with ease, but it's the other nitty-gritty parts that maybe sometimes there's a little bit more effort, or pieces that we don't really love, but we get to find ease in that as well. So I originally was going to go over like 3 to 5 tips. I have 7 on my page right now, and this is just like skimming the surface. So we're going to move through them, see how fast we can get through them all, and then also have some questions at the end. So number 1, I actually want to ask everybody, if you have hosted any retreats, how many you have hosted, put it in the chat. If it's 0, that's totally fine. If you have hosted and you would like to share what your highest profit was from a retreat, I would love to see that as well. So just pop them in. I just want to kind of see where everybody's at. I'm seeing some 0s, and that's fabulous because this is all foundational work. First retreat, April 21st to the 23rd. Woo! Congratulations. Some mini retreats. Awesome. 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 I love it. This is going to be so much fun. Okay. So when I started working in the retreat world, if any of you have worked with me, you probably know that I'm a really positive person for the most part. And if you've been watching my Facebook, you know that the last few months has been tough, and I don't usually share the tough or the hard. But it has been recently coming up that I needed to. But I'm typically a pretty positive person. So when I have worked with retreat clients, I'm always like, whatever you dream up, you can make happen, right? And I do truly believe that in my heart. But I have also been, again, brought to this place of knowing that there is also benefit in in the reality side, right? For lack of better explanation. So this first one is something that I think is so important to get started in the retreat world and in any business world to be successful. And that is to have a community. So if you don't currently have a community, does that mean you can't host retreats? Absolutely not. Like I said, I believe anything's possible. The very first time I hosted a retreat, like I said, I was just inspired. I had no business. I barely had any friends. Like I was just this, person running a remodeling business that decided, hey, there's no retreats for moms. I'm going to do one. And it worked great. We filled it with 40 women. So is it possible? Absolutely. Was it hard? Yes. Was it harder than I wished it was? Yes. If I had a community already built, would it have been easier? Absolutely. So again, my goal for you is for it to be successful and profitable. And therefore, I encourage that you have a community before you start hosting the retreats. That makes sense, right? That's a simple one. Now, if you already have a community, well, let's start with if you don't have a community. So let's say that you're on here right now and you don't have a community yet. That's okay. What I'm going to encourage you to do is give yourself more time. So if you don't have a community yet, don't plan a retreat for 3 months down the road. Let's plan it for next year. And let's build that community. Let's nurture that community. And let's continue to grow it throughout that year. So it gives you a little bit more time. If you currently have a community, what are you meaning with have a community? So what I mean is, so if you currently have a business, it's your audience base, right? It's people who are already purchasing from you. If you don't already have a business, then your community could be a Facebook group. It could be your email list. It could be another space that you're in, whether it's a women's group that gets together once a month. So it's building a space of people that look to you for your expertise. So when I talk about community, that's the main thing that I'm talking about. It's people that are looking to you for your expertise. You can have a community where you are maybe looking to the people outside of you for their expertise. You're a part of their audience then. So you want to have an audience. I use the word community because it feels more authentic for me. It feels better that they're my people versus my audience. But it's your audience. It's people that are already buying from you in one way or another, are already learning from you. Does that help? Wonderful. So if you already do have a community, one thing that I see happen too often is we have a community, we get sucked into our businesses and all the nitty gritty that comes with business life. I mean, it's tax season. You guys all know the fun stuff that happens in business. It's all the stuff that we don't really want to deal with, but we have to. So as we grow, sometimes we get sucked into the vortex of our business and we forget about our community and we forget to nurture them. And if we don't nurture them, then one, we can lose their trust. And two, typically our growth becomes stagnant. So if you already have a community, I encourage you to really have a practice of nurturing that community and continuing to grow that community. So what's your strategy to continue to grow? Okay. All right, let's see. I just want to see if there's anything else that I missed as far as number of retreats. Okay, in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, I want to know how connected you currently are to your audience. Eight, 6, 5, love it. And the one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind, and this we'll talk about a little bit deeper towards the end, but as you grow and nurture your audience, your community, do it with authenticity. 2, just getting started, that's great. 3, love it. So what I want you guys to also know is your community doesn't have to be huge in order to host retreats. If you want to host really, really large events, then you want a bigger community, right? But retreats are typically small and intimate. I usually encourage anywhere from 8 to 10 people per facilitator. So if you're facilitating on your own, 8 to 10 people. If you have a co-facilitator, you could go up to like 16 to 20 people. So your audience doesn't have to be huge, because those that are going to travel with you, they're going to want that deep connection. So just know that the connection is more important than the number of people in your community. It's how deep the connection is. Okay, number 2, know your audience, don't guess. So does anybody feel like they've ever got really excited about an offer in their business, and then they put it out there and it just flops? And you're like, why did that happen? I was so excited for this. What happened? Well, my guess would be that you didn't know your audience. You guessed about your audience, and I've done this. Nothing that I say on here at all is from a place of judgment, and a lot of it's from gained wisdom myself. So a little story, when I did my first retreat, I told you guys that it filled, but it was hard. So I guessed on my audience. I was looking to work with moms, and I was like, as a mom, if I'm going on a retreat, I want my own private space. I don't want anybody in my space. I always have to share my space. I'm constantly touched, people in my energy. I just want my own space. So I assumed everybody that went on that retreat as a mom would want their own room. So I booked a 5-star resort, and I booked it as if every person had their own room. Well, guess what? The majority of my people wanted to share a room with a friend that maybe they hadn't seen in a while. So I had committed to a room block that I couldn't fill. Even though the retreat was filled, I couldn't fill the room block because everybody was sharing rooms, because I didn't know my audience. I guessed based on what I felt. And sometimes that works, but a lot of times it doesn't. While we attract people like us, or people like who we may have been years ago, we still are all individuals. We have different desires. So how we get to do that? Do I always book 5-star amenities? I absolutely do not. I do work in the luxury sector for the most part. So there's all different levels of retreats. You'll see people who are doing retreats that are like in the middle of the jungle places, and there's a niche for that, right? And I work in the luxury sector for the most part. So most accommodations that I book are luxury, but they're not necessarily all 5-star. And it doesn't have to be. To be profitable, it doesn't have to be. I've had clients that do local retreats that are, I would say, like, middle of the road as far as budget goes. They're their most profitable retreats, more profitable than their luxury international ones. So keep that in mind. There is possibility in being profitable in all types of retreats. So how we get to know our audience is, 1, market research. If you've ever worked in the corporate world, you know that they do market research to figure out how to, not only what products their audience is looking for, but how to appeal to that audience. What words do they need to use? What colors do they need to use? What time of day do they need to put the offer out there? So market research, it is actually the #1 mistake that I see retreat facilitators make. They do not do their market research before putting together the details of their retreat. So yes, accurate market research. So we're going to dive into that. So for market research, I encourage, so you already have an audience, right? We talked about, you have your community already. You are going to want to do your market research within your community. My opinion is that 90% of people that book retreats are going to be your direct audience. There's some different opinions out there about that, but I think if you really got down and analyzed every single retreat, and if you even think about if you've ever booked a retreat yourself, you know the person facilitating it. Every once in a while, it might be that you go to one that's like in a unique location, but you still probably somehow got to that person through somebody else. There was some type of referral there. So you want to do that market research within your community. And there's 3 ways to do that. There's probably more than 3 ways. There's 3 ways that I do that. Social media. So have any of you ever noticed that when you ask a question on social media, it's like the most engaging post that you've ever done? People love to share their opinions, and they love to talk about themselves, And I mean, I know I'm the same way. So one of the best ways you can do market research in your community is just ask questions. Okay, Crystal, you can't get a question answered. Okay, we'll have to look at that. For the most part though, and it might be, Crystal, you might be overcomplicating the questions. So sometimes, or using language that your audience isn't, not necessarily not understanding, but they're not feeling, they're not attracted to. So when we do market research, or even when we build out our sales page, we really want to talk at like a 5-year-old like level. And it's not because our audience isn't smart, it's because you want to be able to appeal to the broad spectrum. So if, especially in the retreat world, some of us are doing certain facilitations and teachings, and not everybody's going to know about them. They might be interested in them, or they might just have done it in a different way. There's so many different, let's say massage techniques, right? That if you talked about a specific massage technique, somebody might be thrown off because they're like, I don't recognize that word. I have no idea what they're talking about. And then that's just distracted them from being interested. So with your questions, you want them to be simple, concise, and to be at a level, at a language where your audience is attracted to. And this is going to also, the market research is also going to help you with how to talk to your audience. So some of the questions that I like to ask in market research for retreats specifically is, if you're going between a couple different locations, ask your audience, where do they want to go? What's on their bucket list? Because I'll tell you what, if you launch a retreat that's on somebody's bucket list, that just skyrockets the possibility of them booking your retreat. So where do they want to go? If you have multiple locations that you're looking at, if you know the location you want, don't ask the question. You're going to do it there, and that's fine. Now, there's still value in asking the market research if you haven't analyzed this yet for your market, because you might want to do a small local retreat, and maybe your people are like, no, if I'm going to invest in a retreat, I want to go somewhere. I'll invest more to go somewhere than to stay within 3 hours of my house. Asking about time of year. So time of year is so important because every single audience is different. What can they commit to, and when can they commit to it? How long? So many of us would love to facilitate 7-day retreats, and we know how beneficial it is to get away for 7 days. But if the majority of your audience says they can only do 4 days and you launch a 7-day, again, anything's possible. But would you rather be giving your audience exactly what they're looking for in that moment, or have to kind of fight an uphill battle to convince them to get 7 days away? Excuse me. So once you've done your market research, then you want to do an analysis of that. And as we see in the chat, I get mixed results on getting answers. So sometimes in your market research, you're going to get a 50-50 result, right? And then you have to follow your heart and your intuition of what to do in that situation. It doesn't mean a no in any way, but it also, the analysis can let you know who your hot leads are. So when you do market research, whether you're doing it on social media, let me mute that person. Okay, so let me go back. So we talked about social media. You can set up a Google form. So besides just asking questions, you can set up a Google form with questions. Usually encourage you to keep it to 5 to 7 questions tops, pretty simple questions so they can go through quickly. And then at the bottom, ask for their name and their email, but leave it optional. So that way, if they're not quite a hot lead yet, excuse me, I'm still getting over a little cold and it's saying you're talking too much. So leave it optional, because if they're not ready to be a hot lead yet, you can still get information from them, but it's not requiring them to put that contact information in. Because if you've ever done market research before or answered a questionnaire before and then had to put in your contact information, some people will just exit out and they won't even leave the information. So leave that optional. So analyze. So we want to track. We want to track our results from the market research. Have any of you ever done something in your business where you're either doing market research or you're kind of trying to analyze something and you don't track it, or you're trying to sell something and you get a ton of response on a post, and then you're like, I'll remember that person, I'll remember that they're interested, and then like not even a week later you're like, who was that person interested? Where was that post? Because we post in different groups and different places, and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and email, and it's like, where was that person? I don't know. I've done it a million times, guys. So tracking your results, so important. Anybody that responds to your market research questions, they are a warm lead, at least, if not a hot lead. So make sure that you have your tracking system. I like to use Google Docs. I'm like old school Microsoft, don't want to change. And so I use Google Sheets to track my stuff. Some people have other systems. So whatever system it is that you have, just make sure you're tracking it. Who is interested and what was their response? And that's going to allow you to do your analysis. I'm going to wait a second because you guys are all frozen, but I think it's my internet. All right, the internet troubles. Always when you want to do something fun that the internet decides that it doesn't want to work with you. All right. So next, another thing that I want you guys to analyze before you really dive into the nitty-gritty details of your retreat is, of your audience, what are they currently buying from you? What are your other offers like? So sometimes I've seen people go from offering like a $50 to $100 offer to their audience, and then they jump all suddenly to offering a $5,000 to $10,000 retreat. And again, anything's possible, but your audience, that's a really big leap. They're used to investing around $100 with you, and now you've jumped to $5,000 to $10,000. And again, while that's possible, you still want to analyze that. Are they ready for it? In your market research, ask, what are they willing to invest in a retreat? What are they able to invest? That's going to help you with where to start. It doesn't mean that you won't get to the point of selling a $10,000 retreat. But if your current audience is only able to pay $1,000 for a retreat, then we're going to talk about what we need to do to get them to be able to pay $10,000 for a retreat. Or what shifts we need to make in our audience to be attracting people that can pay $10,000 for a retreat. Okay. Does anybody have any, if you want to put in the chat, I'm going to open my chat back up since it brought me in. If you have done market research for a retreat and you have a different question that you asked that you'd like to share with everybody, pop it in the chat. I'm always big on, we all have amazing things to share with each other, and I love to hear from you guys. So, all right, number 3. So I said we have 7 and we're almost halfway through, and I'm on number 3. So that means talk faster, right? And stop coughing. Number 3 is know your numbers. For any business, anything you do in business, know your numbers. One little trick that I want to share with you guys, and then we'll dive into budgets and stuff. Budgets are difficult to talk about in a broad sense because every single retreat is different. You have retreats that are, like I said, a couple $100 to $25,000 per person. So budgets fluctuate across the board. But this is one little trick that I'd like to share with you guys about budgets that I find is very helpful for facilitators. So when you plan your budget, first off, retreat budgets don't have to be super complex, but know that there's a lot of little expenses. So when you're creating your budget, make sure you spend a couple weeks going back into it to see, did I miss anything? Do you want flowers at your retreat to add a little flair? Well, that's going to cost money. Do you have your insurance coverage for your retreat? That's going to cost money. What about if you're charging people on a merchant service, or if you're not, then I encourage that you do. And so there's merchant service charges. Do you have that in your budget? Your profit, your taxes that you're going to have to pay from your profit. All of those things should be accounted for in your budget so that you know exactly what you're walking away with. I am recording this, so for anybody who has to hop off early, I will send an email out with the recording later this afternoon. So you have all your expenses, and you're going to set a goal for how many spots you want to sell, right? What is that? Merchant services you mentioned. So I personally use Stripe for credit card charges. So the reason why I said that I really encourage it is if you're using PayPal, too many people are running into people disputing their charges on PayPal, even if they got the services, and unable to prove it to PayPal's liking, and then they're getting refunded. So I don't personally, as a business owner, love to use PayPal for transactions. I like to use a credit card service. So whether that, and PayPal has their business account too. So, you know, you have to do what's right for your business. But personally, I like to use a merchant service. So you have Square, you have QuickBooks, you have Stripe, there's a lot of them out there. You have them through most of your banks, but they're going to charge you about 3% per charge is what it averages. So when you pull up how much you're going to charge for your retreat and how many spots you're going to sell, say that the total is $30,000. You're going to multiply that by 3%, put that in your credit card merchant service fees. That can be one that if you don't include that, that could take a big chunk of your profit. So you have all your expenses. Let's say we have that 30,000 that we just said, right? So let's say you're charging 3,000 for the retreat. You want 10 attendees. So that would bring you in $30,000 income, right? And that's going to help you determine, do my expenses align with that and my profit align with that, with what I want to make? But what I encourage you to do is take 70% of that. So let's say that let's look at if you were to only fill 70% of your goal. This is one of the areas where I've struggled the most. And I just talked to a coach about this, that I don't want to be a dream crusher, right? Like, I am a manifester. I love, I believe anything's possible. I believe in dreaming big. And she said, sharing tactics of how to be successful doesn't mean you're a dream crusher. That's how it was feeling for me. But how wonderful would it be to plan your budget as if you filled 70%, which is keeping you safe, because for first retreats, that's average. If you fill 70%, you did well. Now let's say you filled 100%. Well, cha-ching, more money in your pocket. Doesn't sound like a bad thing to me. So base your income part of your budget on 70% of your goal. And know your numbers. Don't guess, guys. On your numbers, do not guess. Do the legwork. Spend a couple weeks. It's one of the most important pieces, because retreats are a lot of work. You will spend anywhere from 150 to 200 hours planning and facilitating a retreat. So you don't want to walk away with bare minimum, because your time and energy could be better spent if that's the case. All right, number 4, clear communication. What I think sets mediocre retreats apart from really amazing retreats is great communication. When you not only communicate with your audience when you're marketing, but when you have clear communication once they've signed up and through the process prior to going on the retreat, at the retreat, and post-retreat, that is what is going to have them keep coming back for more, because they're going to feel safe and they're going to feel confident. and it's going to allow for a smoother process along the way. So you want to make sure that when you are marketing the retreat, that you're being really clear on what they can expect. So if it's going to be all vegan, you want to make sure you communicate that. If it's going to be alcohol free, you want to make sure that you communicate that. Sometimes we're like, well, my people just know that it's going to be vegan, or it's going to be, this, or it's going to be that. No, put it in the marketing. Make sure if it's a big part for you and it's a part of the vibe you want to create, put it in the marketing, because it's going to allow them to know what to expect. And you're also going to attract the people that you want there. So make sure you know that they know what to expect. Have a questionnaire for your attendees. So again, I love Google Form. Create a questionnaire that asks them about themselves. Because even if it's your best friend that's coming on your retreat, I would bet there's some things you don't know about that person that could help make that experience really special for them. So some of the most important things on your questionnaire, if you do nothing else, have these on there. Emergency contact information, super important. Do they have any dietary restrictions? So again, this is a choice, but I will say, in my opinion, to be super successful in the long term, honoring people's dietary restrictions to a degree, depending on what types of retreats you're hosting. I've had somebody who is like, oh, I can only eat these 8 things. Okay, then bring those 8 things so that you can make sure that you're well nourished. But if it's you see more and more of this, gluten-free or dairy-free or corn-free, things like that. If you can honor those, it's going to make the world of a difference for somebody that eats in those dietary restrictions. And it's going to, a lot of times, have them choose your retreats over another one, because they know when they go there, they're going to be able to eat, which is an important thing. I say that food, so there's 2 things that are like the top 2 things. Well, okay. There's a lot of top things, right? But food makes the experience. We all have to eat, first off. If you're going through transformation, you need to be well nourished. And in our society, things revolve around food. Good experiences revolve around food. And so making sure that they have a good experience with the food is important. So asking about their dietary restrictions at least is, in my opinion, super important. Plus, if you have someone that's super allergic to something, like anaphylactic, then you want to make sure that the chef isn't using that at all, if at all possible. So how can you accommodate them? And then your questionnaire should include any other details that you would like to know about them that might be important for what you're facilitating. So what transformations are they going to be going through? And is it important to know, have they had any trauma around this area? Have they ever experienced this facilitation? That really is determined on what you are hosting and what information you want to have from them. If you're going to be traveling internationally, you'll definitely want to look at, okay, do they have their passport? If not, how far out it is, because you don't want somebody paying for a full retreat, not having a passport, and then dealing with that afterwards of, okay, are they going to get their passport in time? Are they not? So you want to make sure for international travel. And then for international travel, also just, is there anything they should know about that? Is there anything you need to know about them regarding international travel? So have a questionnaire. Like I said, super simple to put together on Google Form and send it out. Attendee packet. So I encourage having an attendee packet that gets sent out to the attendees anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks prior, depending on the retreat. You could do 2 weeks also if it's more of a local retreat, but if it's international, usually a little bit further out is when you want to send that out. The attendee packet has information on what they should bring. What's the itinerary, which I always encourage putting that it's tentative, because things change. If you're traveling internationally, what do they need to know and what do they need to bring? So they need to bring their passport. They need to bring an ID. They need to bring travel insurance documents. What do you know about the international phone plans that they need to know? Remind them to let their credit card companies and their bank know. What type of currency is accepted? all those little details, because that's going to make them feel nice and cozy and comfortable in having the details. And anything that's not in there, because you're not going to have a 10-page document, it also gets that conversation going of what questions are there. Besides the attendee packet, what I usually encourage clients to do is to put together the attendee packet, send it out, and then a week later do a call with all attendees, going through the packet and seeing if anybody had any questions come up. Last is some type of group messenger. I know not everybody loves group messengers. I usually encourage at the very beginning to let people know this is for information only. This is for emergencies. This is not like for chit chat. Put everybody in there and just have the important information. It helps during travel days to know where people are at. Is everybody okay? And then it also helps during, because you can just send them information for the next day. Hey, here's the schedule. This is what you're going to need. This is what you're encouraged to wear, you know, that sort of thing. So clear communication is number 4. And that, I think, is one of those that it's like the icing on the cake. So it's not quite the cherry on top yet, but it's the icing on the cake of this facilitator knows what they're doing. They care about how we feel. They are communicating clearly. So I know that my process is going to be nice and smooth. All right, number 5. Deciding if I want to switch this up, but you know, it probably came in exactly as it was supposed to. So number 5 is have fun and be you. As I mentioned, this is a $900 billion industry. So some people will get down on themselves and say, well, why me? Why me out of this $900 billion industry? Why would people choose me? And it's because it's you. You are important. You are on this call for a reason. There is something that called you here. There is some type of impact that you are seeking to create. And if it's one person's life that has changed because you put on a retreat, I guarantee you it's worth it. Because I've had those people show up and I've seen their lives change, and there's nothing else like it. And it's not about that we're creating the impact, right? We're creating the inspiration. It's not necessarily that we're, you know, I always say that we're holding the container. You know, I don't take credit that those people changed. They chose to change. They chose to show up and their lives are changed. But yes, have fun and be you. Because if it's not fun, why are you doing it? Don't just do a retreat because everybody else is doing retreats. Because there's a lot of other fun things out there that you can do that maybe will feel right for you. But you are also do a retreat that embodies you, that when somebody looks at it, they see the marketing, they show up to it, they're like, yes, this is so Carrie. Like, and that's why I showed up for it. That's why I'm here, because I wanted to hang out with her. I wanted to be in her energy, and I wanted to experience a retreat that is her vision. Don't let that piece fall away when you start to get into the nitty-gritty, because it can happen. It does happen. So just always come back to that. Who am I? And am I having fun doing this? Number 6, give yourself time. So like I said at the beginning of the call, even if you have a community doing a retreat in 3 months, if you're like, you get off this call and you're like so amped up, you're like, this is amazing, I can't wait to host my retreat. Don't plan it for 3 months, please. You can. Again, I'm not going to be a dream crusher, but I find that the most successful timelines for local, close to you, you already have a community, 3 to 6 months planning time. Domestic, outside of your local area, which local I usually say like 3 hours, within 3 hours of you. So outside of that 3 hours, domestic, 6 to 9 months. International, at least 9 to 12. And that's going to depend on the country you're going to, if you've ever been there before. If you've never been there, and I would say it's not like Mexico or Central America, if you're looking at like Europe, 12 to 18 months. Not only because you want to be able to find a venue, right? You don't want to just like be taking the leftovers that are left during the dates that you're looking at, but you want to make sure that you can do the legwork of service providers, vet them, really take your time with that. So give yourself time. Last, number 7, I cruised through these last few. Remember that this is a production. So when you think of it as a production, it allows you to look at all the little details that go into play. And when you look at it as a production, your attendees get to experience it as a production. And that is where you get that smooth feeling, that good experience that keeps them wanting to come back for more. So it's not like, you know, it's not like putting on like a family event, right? Where we just kind of pull it together. It's a full production. What's going on in the background to make sure that whatever's on stage, not literal stage, but you know, that whatever's on stage is happening smoothly. What's happening in the background to make sure that the energy is staying in a good place. So making sure that you are looking at it as a production. And I hope that that makes sense, because honestly, that was the last one was one that it just literally popped in my head. I was sitting outside yesterday and it goes, they need to know it's a production. So those are my 7 things that I wanted to discuss today, because the tips could go on and on and on, as most of you know that have either been in the retreat space for some time, or maybe you've done events or even in business. So that is just very surface level of retreats. As I said, it can be anywhere from 150 to 200 hours to plan and facilitate a retreat. So I do want to open up some time for questions, which is why I